Hi, I'm Tyra G, your host of Frankly Speaking with Tyra G. Welcome again to our virtual global gathering of phenomenal women and those who love you. Yes, you, mothers, daughters, grand and great-grandmothers, fearsome and generous, humble and honest, in pursuit of new possibilities and purpose. For those of you joining us for the first time, each month we explore a new theme inspired by you. Yeah, I said you. Together we bravely walk into places where tradition has taught us there are things we just don't talk about, but not at this table. No matter how hard judgment knocks, it will never get in. Beloved ladies, here we live beyond the wreckage. This month's theme is This Is Us. It's all about who we are, what we believe, what drives us, what causes us to fall, what brings us joy. Every week we will meet here for 1 hour to experience, encourage, and empower each other. We're going to share some aha moments and some stories that have been kept in our pockets for way too long. Now, every week we're going to start right where we are. Although many of your voices will speak light into the darkness, there is no insignificant person around this table. Each show's going to have 3 segments: the beginning, the middle, and the end. The middle is when we have our brave, fearsome volunteer from around the table to sit in the interview seat. Yeah, that's when the fun really begins. You're listening to Radio Fairfax, Virginia, on your TV, computer, or mobile device. And we're webcast worldwide on the internet at www.radiofairfax.org. If you have competing priorities, don't worry about it. You can catch up with us on our YouTube channel, Frankly Speaking with Tyra G. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want to acknowledge once again the composer and performer of our theme, Mr. Courtney Nero. Courtney knew I was trying to make my dream come true, Frankly Speaking with Tyra G. He surprised me with my own personal theme song, and this is it. Does it make you feel like dancing? I call it Amazing Awesome Sauce, and he named it I'm Listening. Thank you, Courtney. I like to create a virtual common space for us to inhabit during our time together. This week, we're going to talk about saying yes to the power within us. We have 3 stories from 3 phenomenal women from 3 generations. But we're going to look beyond their words, and we're going to see evidence of them saying yes as we watch their lives unfold and speak. They're going to remind you that nothing just happens. Life is a process. It is not an event. 2 of the women's gift will be shared through their legacies and their memories. The third is sitting in the studio right here with me. All 3 voices share the fact that real change happens on a level of gesture. If one person doing one thing differently, he or she has done before. They'll remind you that nothing just happens. After the break, you will hear one of our first stories. Now you stay close. Born Marguerite Johnson, Dr. Maya Angelou was raised by her mother, Lady Vivian Baxter, a self-possessed, successful entrepreneur and businesswoman who owned a hotel and wore diamonds in her ears. Unmarried, Marguerite was pregnant when she finished high school in the summer of 1945. Her son was born in September, and she decided to leave home 2 months later. Leaving the comfort of her mother's big house, which had live-in help, was characteristic of Dr. Angelou's courage and fierce sense of independence. She's gone on to embrace and excel at a dizzying array of disciplines. She speaks French, Italian, Spanish, and West African Fanti. She has danced on stage, composed music. She's written plays, directed and acted in movies. In 1960, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. asked her to become the Northern Coordinator for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And in 1993, President-elect Bill Clinton requested that she write a poem for his inauguration. Dr. Angelou has written 6 autobiographies, including the best-selling novel, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. It was published by Random House in 1969. She's written 3 children's books, 6 plays, and 2 screenplays, numerous books of poetry and other books. Just Give Me a Cool Drink of Water Before I Die, a collection of her poetry, earned a Pulitzer Prize nomination in 1971. In 1981, she was appointed to a lifetime post as Reynolds Professor of American Studies at Wake Forest University. This avalanche of achievement could not seem more improbable on the day the 17-year-old Marguerite left her mother's house with 2-month-old son in her arms. She had found a job, a room with cooking privileges down the hall, and a lady who would babysit. Now, fast forward. Here is what Dr. Angelou, 78, would say to her younger self. Dear Marguerite, you're itching to be on your own. You don't want anybody telling you what time you have to be in at night or how to raise your baby. You're going to leave your mother's big, comfortable house, and she won't stop you because she knows you too well. But listen to what she says. When you walk out of my door, don't let nobody raise you. You've been raised. You know right from wrong. In every relationship you make, you have to show readiness to adjust and make adaptations. Remember, you can always come home. You will go home again when the world knocks you down or when you fall down in full view of the world, but only for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. Your mother will pamper you and feed you your favorite meal of red beans and rice. You may practice going home so she can liberate you again. One of the greatest gifts, along with the nurturing of your courage, that she will give you. Be courageous, but not foolhardily. Walk proud as you are. And for those of you who listen, I first met Maya Angelou in 1978. She was having her birthday party at a charter school named after her. I stood in line forever, as you can imagine how many people were there, to say happy birthday and to remind her of a time we had met 30 years before. When I reached out my hand and began to say happy birthday, Maya, she said, "Oh, yes. And how is your president?" And she called her by name. And I thought, this is 30 years later. She is truly a phenomenal woman. That's one of the gifts she gave. But please understand that Maya Angelou had a long journey to get to that point of worthiness. If you get a chance, read her autobiography. It will encourage you and empower you. We'll have another chance to connect with her at the end of our program. For now, I want you to meet the lady in the studio. One of my dear friends, actually. I asked her months ago, "Hey, I'm working on this project. Please, will you come and do something special for us?" So my second phenomenal woman today is in the studio, Ms. Denise Fayne. And I'd like her to tell you a little bit about who she is.
Hi, Tyra.
Hi.
Glad to be here. Thank you. All right. Well, most stories start at the beginning. Mine started in Detroit, Michigan. I was the surprise baby after older brother and sister. I actually grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, in a very segregated area, and at one point was charged with integrating the 6th grade of an all-white school. It was difficult for a young child. I enjoyed music. I thought I was going to be a musician early on. I played clarinet and oboe, and I tried the flute, and I actually was a baton twirler. I used to speak Spanish and French quite well, but unfortunately the years have passed, and I haven't had much opportunity to practice.
Hola.
Hola. Bonjour. I graduated from the University of Tennessee as a history major, and you'll hear more about that later. because history was and still is my first love. But then I made this right turn and went to law school instead of an advanced degree in history. I went to Notre Dame Law School, and when I graduated, I knew I wanted to work in civil rights, human rights. I spent a little time in criminal law and worked as an attorney with legal aid. But then I realized I really wanted to get back into civil rights, human rights. I went to work for the Tennessee Valley Authority for a number of years, and I actually was the director of the Human Rights Office here in Alexandria for another group of years. I have to say, in between those two particular positions, I held the most difficult position I've had before or since, and that was as a mother. I stayed home with my 3, Ethan, Camille, and Jessica, for 8 years, and I did not go back into work until Jessica actually started first grade. That was the hardest job of all the jobs I've ever had. I loved it, but it was hard. I actually ended my career, my professional career, as a senior executive with the Internal Revenue Service. Believe it or not, Tyra, I've been retired for 5 years.
I don't believe it.
I'll be retired for 5 years this December. And I tell you, my retirement has been wonderful because I've gotten to work in some of the things I love the most. I'm an orchid grower, as you know.
Yes.
And my other love is, of course, history, as I said before. And I have the privilege, the distinct privilege, of being a docent at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I mentioned my 3 children, but I didn't mention my wonderful husband, Vincent. We have been married as of next week, 34 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Doesn't usually happen like that anymore.
No, it doesn't. I feel so very blessed. He is a wonderful, wonderful man. And we have a couple of little guys, 4-legged little guys running around the house. Matthew the cat. And
I don't believe that.
Yes. Yeah, I know. You never see him when he
Right.
comes. Yeah, he always runs away. And Thomas, my 12-year-old beagle. Now, Thomas has a peculiar habit every day. He can tell time, and he knows when it's 3:30.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what I'm doing, he'll start circling around me, putting his paws on me, and letting me know that it is 3:30 and it's time for the reading hour. I have to get in my comfortable chair, get a book to allow him to crawl up in my lap and take his afternoon nap. So that is my life, my wonderful, privileged, blessed life, I'll say. Absolute blessed. And I'm just glad to be here today.
I am so glad we are finally doing this. We've talked about it.
Yes.
And you remind me that there are a million ways that we can circle around ourselves to grow and change and be okay. And I want today to start with where you are now.
Okay.
And enjoying one of your passions. You didn't talk much about your orchids, but we'll go forward. One of your passions.
Don't get me started on those orchids.
I know. And I ask you to do something maybe a little unusual. It's going to require listeners to use their imagination. But I asked Denise to take us on an audio tour of the Museum of African American Culture and History. And so I'm going to hand it off, dear.
All right. Well,
I'm coming through the door.
You're not coming too far through the door because you're going to be stopped by the metal detector.
Okay.
I don't know that how many of your listeners have actually been to the museum, but I have to start by saying it is a marvelous, beautiful place.
Yes.
And I encourage everyone, if you're in the Washington, D.C. area, to get there as soon as you can get tickets, as soon as you can. As I said, the first stop will be the metal detectors because it is not only is it a federal facility, it is a facility with a great number of artifacts. Over 37,000 artifacts are in the museum currently, and some which are just absolutely priceless. So for many reasons, we ask people not to bring in or take out anything they should not. Once you pass the metal detector, Tyra, remember the beautiful, huge open hall?
Yes.
We call that Heritage Hall.
Okay.
It's kind of our reception area.
Yes.
Beautiful artwork, and it's a place for people to meet and greet, and we give a brief overview of what's going to happen because it is a little different. The museum is 10 stories high.
Yeah,
but when you're standing there looking at it, you don't realize that because 4 stories are actually underground.
Right.
So I'm going to take my guests down this long, steep escalator, describing the museum, describing the wonderful scroll work that is a tribute to African American enslaved people from Charleston, New Orleans, who actually prepared those beautiful bronze figures that you would see on the outside of the building. I'll talk about that a little bit. 400,000 square feet in the museum. And by this time, we're about to get into a very long line.
Yes.
It is still a very long line.
Yes, it is.
To get into the most popular section of the museum, and that's the History Gallery. It happens to be my favorite section, although I love walking through all of it. I just tend to spend most of my time downstairs in the 3 floors of the History Gallery.
Now, explain how the lighting is down there.
There is very little lighting.
Yes.
It's low.
Yes.
The ceilings are low compared to these sky-sized ceilings we have throughout the rest of the museum.
Right.
And it's intended that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's intended to be low and dark to evoke in some very small measure what it must have felt like for Africans stolen from their villages and dragged to the coast and placed in castles and forts and to wait for the slave ship to take them to places unknown.
Yes.
It was a dark time for them, so we've kept it dark and low. And because it is very popular, it is often very, very crowded. I will walk people through the History Gallery, starting at the point where Africans and Europeans first began to interact with each other, not as slave and master, but as traders. They traded in gold and silk and rice and cotton and yams and a number of other items for centuries before the slave trade began.
Yes.
So I will walk them through that. I will take them on a horrendous journey aboard a slave ship. We don't have a slave ship in the museum. This is not where we're trying to replicate what it would be like on a slave ship, but I certainly spent some time standing there talking to people about what it was like on a ship like that, where they might be on the ship for 4 to 6 weeks before they even made it to the New World.
Yes.
Through that, we'll go through the colonial America. We'll talk about the Revolution. And we have a unique section after the Revolution called the Paradox of Liberty, where we spend time talking about all of the founding documents from the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And I often turn to our visitors, especially if we have children, younger people, and I'll say, what rights under this list of Bill of Rights did enslaved Africans have?
What do they say?
I usually get some silence, and I'll say, well, let's cover what those Bill of Rights were. You know, the freedom of assembly, freedom of redress of grievances, freedom to bear arms, freedom of association. Which ones of those did enslaved Africans have? None. They were not considered citizens of the country. So we'd spend some time on that. I'd take them through what it was like perhaps to suffer the lash. We have a lash there. It was a gift to us from Miss Oprah Winfrey. We talk about cotton gin, cotton bags, and dragging up to 500 bags of cotton a day.
Yes,
to avoid the lash. And I'll take them through a slave block and buying and selling of slaves from young children to the very old, on through Harriet Tubman, on up to the Civil War. And I will spend some time talking about the Civil War because it's obvious to me, based on conversations I've had, that people have very different understandings of what the causes of the Civil War were. And I'd like, quite frankly, to set them straight. And I will do that to the best of my ability, and we'll stop. I'll talk about Abraham Lincoln and his views. I'll talk about the brave African-American soldiers who joined the Union, and we'll move on from there. The next level of the museum is the era of segregation that talks about the next 100 years following the Civil War, following the end of slavery, and African-Americans. What I talk about progress and pain. Because even while they were having a great deal of progress, moving away from slavery, starting businesses, starting farms, they were also the subject of great terror. The growth of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yes.
At that level in the museum is another very, very popular and sacred place. And it's a place people often overlook. And so I'm going to describe right now how to get to the Emmett Till Memorial. Because I've had so many people say, well, where is it? I missed it. Well, it is at the very back in the far corner behind the Angola prison tower.
Where they pushed it, where history has pushed it.
Yeah, and they wanted it there
Yes.
simply because they wanted the Emmett Till Memorial to be a quiet, sacred place. It is the only place in the museum where no photography is allowed.
Yes, yes, yes.
Because to tell this story properly and to properly honor this young man and his mother, very brave woman, we have set it in the back, and there's always long lines there. But I encourage people to go and stop and listen to the story Mamie Till tells about what happened to her son, the sacrificial lamb of the civil rights movement, as she called him. We also have a giant Southern Railway car.
I know.
And I love that car simply because it reminded me so much of my childhood. My father worked for Southern Railway for 43 years. So I spent many, many years on a car like that going across the country.
Well, it's interesting that I actually went in and remembered Mother taking me to grandmother's house from Cincinnati to South Carolina.
There you go.
And how, of course, the cars were segregated, but the porters, the bellmen would be there, and the Pullman porters to help us, to help us along the way.
They did. And they would do everything they could. I will say that my father was, in fact, a Pullman porter for the first 3 years he worked for Southern Railway, until my mother said, yeah, she's had enough of him on the road. She wanted him to come home. You know, all the Pullman porters, they were all called George, from George Pullman,
yes,
the founder of the Pullman
yes,
porters.
yes.
And they were all called George. My father's name was Ralph. But, but after he came off the road, he spent another 40 years on Southern Railway.
But see, that was what people don't understand. That was a wonderful job.
It's a wonderful job.
My uncle wasn't. I mean, you could take care of your family.
Yes.
You could take care of your family's family.
Yes.
So that was a prize.
Yes.
That was a prize.
Got me through college.
Yeah.
So, so that it's always so interesting to sit there and look at that train and remember, from a young child, that train would cross over the Ohio River, and all of a sudden, segregation ended.
But not quite.
But not quite. But all of a sudden, we could sit anywhere we wanted. We weren't restricted to the car simply because we crossed the Ohio River. And the reverse, of course, occurred coming back south. So the next and final level, what I didn't mention is there is a massive section on the era of segregation level dealing with the civil rights movement and all of the heroes of that movement.
Heroes and sheroes.
And sheroes, thank you, of that movement. Fannie Lou Hamer and Rosa Parks. I mean, they're all there. And I encourage people to come. And, of course, my personal hero, Congressman John Lewis, because had it not been for him, we might not have had this museum. He, from 1987, his first year in Congress, up until 2003, at the opening of Congress every single year, he actually introduced legislation for this museum.
Yes.
So we're very, very thankful for his efforts and his leadership.
And to still have him.
And he's just wonderful. He was through there not too long ago. He likes to check out the place every now and then. And then, of course, the last section in the History Gallery is 1968 and beyond. Now, Tyra, you and I both remember 1968.
Yes.
1968 was...
I remember April 4th.
I remember April 4th.
Yes.
April 4th, June 5th.
Yeah.
You remember so many horrible things that happened on April 4th. I will tell my guests walking through the museum, April 4th to me was April 4th, 1968, the day Martin Luther King was assassinated. That was the day the world tilted.
It did.
It changed forever. And this section of the museum describes that quite well, in that there are huge pictures and all different sorts of media. They look somewhat like picket signs, don't you think?
Yeah, they do.
They were designed to evoke the picket signs of the civil rights movement. And we have sections on one side that are more dealing with the more traditional efforts of the followers of Dr. King. And, of course, on the other side of the room, you're going to see all sorts of information on the rise of Black Power.
Yes,
the rise of the Black Panthers, the Nation of Islam. And then toward the back, of course, is also this change in culture that was happening oh so subtly to many people, it was subtle, I guess. But to us, it was a major change in the TV culture, movie culture.
Yes.
All of a sudden, we weren't seen just as, in certain lights. Mm-hmm. We were expanding. Mm-hmm. We were spies. We were doctors. We were all other sorts of things than just being limited.
I remember when I was little, and we had one TV.
Yes, one
and
TV.
And if we knew there was going to be someone of color on there, we'd call everybody on the block. Hey, check this out at 8:00. On Ed Sullivan's going to have
so and so.
Yeah,
on our 3 channels.
Yes. So I guess the listening audience knows that we probably are somewhere around the boomer generation.
Yes, dead center.
That's right.
Dead center of the boomer generation.
But we can relate.
Yes, we can. We can remember all of that. Mm-hmm. So that is the history gallery. That's 18,000 square feet. It's about a mile and a half. Mm-hmm. If I get to talking, as you can tell now, it takes a couple of hours to get through it. Yeah. But I just truly love giving tours of that section.
And that's obvious.
Yeah, I do.
Well, move us on up.
Yeah, I'm moving us on up. So we're going to, I probably want to just come up one level and talk about 2 things on what we call the concourse level. Now, that's the level where that huge line snakes around to go back down into the history gallery. When you come out, there's something you have to stop and see. We call it the contemplative court. Mm-hmm. It is, it is a wonderful reflective space, a giant waterfall, circular waterfall coming out of the ceiling, surrounded by quotes by everyone from Sam Cooke to Dr. King.
Mm-hmm. What's special about that space?
It is a nice, soft, reflective space to which you can see outside through the ceiling. We call it the oculus because you can actually see the sky.
And what was there?
It's up there at the top that people can look down into that space. There's a bench that goes all the way around the top of the circumference of the waterfall, and people can see in.
Now, is that the place where that marks where we used to sell slaves in D.C.?
Oh, well, yeah. This area, remember, the museum is sitting on what's probably the last available piece of land on the mall in Washington, D.C.
Got it.
5 acres. Mm-hmm. And that 5 acres, and a little bit behind it, actually, ironically enough, was in fact a tobacco plantation, and slaves were there working that plantation.
Okay.
And so, we go from the plantation to owning the space. I
understand.
As we leave there, I'm not going to leave there until we come back out of the contemplative court, and you're going to make a left turn and stop at Sweet Home Cafe.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is a miraculous, wonderful, tasty spot to stop. It is, in fact, the one cafeteria, the one cafe in the museum, and it's a history lesson in itself.
Yes, it is.
Because it talks about the 4 major regions, north and the west and the south, where African Americans have had a great role, influence in the culinary efforts of those different regions. I do love the shrimp and grits, and I do love the fried chicken. But I have to admit, I like the oxtails from the northwest, from the Midwest, and I love the trout from the west. So, there's food from all different sections. And then when you go and sit down, you'll look around and see pictures and stories, everything from our 4 young men from Greensboro who sat at the lunch counter to all the stories about the culinary arts. So I encourage everybody to please stop there and stop when you're hungry, because there's going to be plenty of food to eat there.
Absolutely.
So then we're going to go up to the next
Have we passed
levels.
the theater yet?
Oh, dear. Bless your heart. Yes, we're about to pass the theater, but thank you for stopping me. Coming back out of the cafeteria, we have the Oprah Winfrey Theater. I'm hoping one day they'll actually put a glass door so people can actually look in, because it's closed unless it's being used for special events. It's not open to the public most of the time. But it is a beautiful space where they've actually replicated the iron work on the outside of the building on the walls inside. It's a huge stage. So I'm sure over time there's going to be all sorts of musicals. And there have already been many readings and book signings and that sort of thing.
What's there now?
Right now, there's I don't know that anything that's going on right at
Okay.
this moment, but there's always something.
Okay.
But it's usually not like day in and day out. It's
Okay.
usually a one-night event.
Special event.
Special event, exactly. So, yeah, pay attention to our website. Always go on our website and see what's happening because there's always something going on. We're going to celebrate. I'm glad you mentioned that. We're going to celebrate our 1-year anniversary on September 24th.
No, I didn't, thank you very much.
We've been open. We will have been open 1 year on September 24th. And last I heard, when I was there the other day, we've just passed the 2.5 million visitor mark in 1 year.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So we're very proud of that. We're very proud of that. So,
okay, I'm up. We're going up.
Going up. The next 2.5 levels, we have a level called Explore More, and it is a rather open area. I often tell the people with very young children, if they need to run around and blow off a little steam, this is the spot. We actually have a place where they can stand and learn Step Africa steps.
Yes.
That's a lot of fun. But behind it is a very unique story of the Green Book.
Yeah.
The Green Book was
what we needed to get through it.
What we needed to get from the south to the north, or north to the south safely, where places to stay, places to eat, places to buy gas, places to use the restroom, all of that. Yeah. So, and there's a little car there where you can sit there and it's like you're taking this trip to grandma. And it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. Up on the next level is our community level. And in community, we have the sports section on one side, military on the other, and in the center and toward the back, all about community activism. I encourage everyone to please stop at the military section.
Oh, yes. It's phenomenal.
African Americans have fought in every single war since the revolution in this country. And this shows each and every conflict in which we have been engaged.
And the plane, the Tuskegee Airmen.
But most importantly, I'll get to that. But most importantly, I was going to talk about his medals first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Most importantly, we have a wall at the side of the military that lists the 87 African Americans who won the Medal of Honor. So, and that is,
yes, I forgot.
Yeah, to me that is a very special place.
87
from the Civil War,
yes,
on up to Vietnam. That's where we've stopped it so far. But we do have some blank space on the wall, so I'm sure that there will be others.
Hopefully,
yeah, or hopefully not. I was going to mention one of our Tuskegee Airmen. I had the privilege of bringing this family through. I won't mention their name, but I had the privilege of bringing them through. There was a family of 50 descendants of this one particular family members and descendants of this one particular Tuskegee Airman who recently passed away. They ranged in age from 101 to 6 months.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was such a wonderful joy to first show them the Tuskegee plane. It's a Tuskegee training plane that we have hanging from the ceiling, and to show some of the medals that their family member had achieved. The next level up is our culture level. Oh my goodness!
Yes.
You walk in and boom, 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 boom. You hear the music beating,
and you see people dancing.
You see people dancing on. They're all the way around the walls, and there's just the media. The multimedia just changes each level you go up.
It's amazing.
So you're going to see everything there from the sculpture, the Nigerian king sculpture that has the headpiece that evokes the description and shape of the building.
Yes.
And on the one side we have art, on the other side we have taking the stage screen and television, and straight back music. And you can hear it from throughout the museum, throughout that floor, in fact. But the first thing you see as you walk through is Mr. Chuck Berry's ruby red Cadillac.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, I just love that. And we have everything in there from a reproduction of an old radio, record store where you could sit in there and remember how we used to go and flip through the albums and listen to the albums. And at the other end of that same room, we have the place where the youngsters can go through and scratch records and pretend like they're mixing and all of that. It's just wonderful. So I'm encouraging everybody. I have given you a very quick overview. You know why? I haven't told you all the things I want you to see, because I want you to be amazed when you come in.
And it is amazing. And what I have found truly marvelous every time I've gone is the diversity of the visitors.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm a people watcher. And I think maybe the second time I really start looking at how people were responding because the lower levels is a visceral experience, and it can evoke anger, appreciation, amazement, and
deep sadness.
Oh,
that's what I've encountered many times. I keep a wad of Kleenex in my bag because I'm passing them out because it impacts people that much.
And I'm guessing that anybody listening would know which generation would gravitate to which exhibit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think
there's no doubt. Now, while the veterans might want to go to military, they'll also want to go down to history.
Oh, yeah.
The teens, if you ask them, they're heading straight for music.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I found?
What?
The teens, because they're on a tour, because they're a school group or a family, and they've been told they've got to go to history first, they've been very respectful.
Oh,
they have been very quiet. I can see their eyes shining. They're growing as if to say, what is this? What happened? How did this happen? Because we know this is not being taught in our schools as it should be.
Yeah, and what I'm wondering, Denise, as we sit here, are there collaborations with schools, with school districts now to incorporate this?
Well, excuse me, there are many different collaborations we're having with the schools.
Okay.
Schools have come and asked us to make presentations. They've asked the professional curators. Remember, I'm a volunteer, but they've asked professional curators to come and make presentations. We have many things out on the website, particularly for schools. And we're encouraging school systems to bring their children, bring them on field trips. I understand that there's been an educational group that's been convened, both of volunteers and professional staff. They're working together to start giving more advice and guidance to the different school groups. So there's a lot of that's growing.
Well, what I want to do is take a break.
Sure.
And I want to come back because you have an assignment you haven't executed yet. Okay?
All right.
Denise, there's something that is very critical to our show today, and that's for people to understand you just didn't pop into the museum and suddenly become a docent. Tell us what it was like during your year of training.
It was one of the greatest experiences I've had in my life. I think I told you, Tyra, that my plan was to work in that museum no matter what. All I had to do was retire first. And I managed to plan my retirement such that I retired a couple of years before the museum started taking applications. So I applied and I was accepted, and then January of 2016, the training started. We were in training every week. We had books and books and books. It felt like a graduate course. I loved every minute. I soaked it up. People ask me now, they said, well, how long were you in training? I want to say 1 year and 40 years. What? Well, I was in training for the museum docent work for a year, but I've been in training for this work for the past 40, ever since I graduated with my degree in history. I just love it. I went to law school. I did what I had to do. It was a great career for me, but my first love was always history. So, yes, I spent a year. We talked about everything from the beginning of slavery all the way up to the inauguration of Barack Obama. And that's kind of how if you think about it, that's kind of how the History Museum is galleries are laid out. Yeah. So, yeah, we had training. We had professors coming in. We had practice sessions. Yeah, it was.
Did you have tests?
Did we have tests? Thank you. I think I suppressed the tests. Those tests were something. They were usually online, and they were quite intense, and they were very concentrated bits of information we were expected to retain. And I'm happy to say that I passed with flying colors and have just enjoyed every minute of it. And after the training, in fact, and after we spent some time, as you will recall, practicing, walking through the museum, talking to myself, trying to learn all the bits of the museum. I can actually literally walk through this museum, as I just did, blindfold, and can tell you just about where every artifact is.
That is amazing.
I have to be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
So I would do that, and recently we had certifications had certification test. We had to stand in front of a group of people and give a bit of a tour and talk and answer questions. So we passed our certification. So yeah, it's been a wonderful.
I remember
wonderful
when
thing.
you were at the point where you said, "Oh, I need to do a 40-minute tour," and I'm going, "How can you do a 40-minute tour?" You said, "I don't know. I guess I'll just pick 5 things and talk about it." I said, "Not you."
That's
but
exactly
you did
right. That's exactly. Well, I picked my 5 things, and I did my 40-minute tours because that was what was expected. But don't expect us to spend just 40 minutes with me in the history gallery. I can promise you that.
I know. But you know what, we were talking, the theme is saying yes to the power within you.
Yes.
And we know that Maya said yes. And I hear Denise saying yes. And what's interesting to me, and I want to say to anyone listening, it's never over. Every day you wake up, you have a chance to be more than who you've become.
Exactly.
And to see your face sitting across from me as you talk about this, I feel the passion. I love it.
Yes.
And I'm so proud of you. As
Thank
we
you.
close out the museum, tell me about one special, I don't know, you pick it, something special, someone you met or an event.
Couple of, I'm stuck with one, huh? See, that's like 40 minutes.
Okay.
I'm stuck with one. I think I'm going to have to, it's not a person I met, but it's one item I did not talk about.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how long it's going to be there. I'm hoping it's going to be there for a while longer. There is a phenomenal video there toward the entrance of the museum called August 28th.
Yes.
A Day in the Life of a People.
Yes.
By Ava DuVernay.
Yes.
Award-winning filmmaker. And it describes 6 different instances of phenomenal things that happened to African Americans throughout our history on August 28th, ranging from the date the British freed the enslaved population of Britain and its colonies, August 28th, to the March on Washington, August 28th, to the death of the murder of Emmett Till, August 28th, and some others. It's beautifully enacted.
Did you say Katrina?
I didn't say Katrina, bless your heart. No, and Katrina, August 28th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a couple more beyond that.
Wow.
And it just tells the story. And I've seen people just sitting there drenched in tears.
Yeah.
At the thought, how can this be? What is it about this day?
Yes.
And so I encourage people, if you get there, ask yourself, or ask, do I want to see this? Do I have time to see this? And ask the welcome desk to point it out to you so you can get there and spend about 20, 25 minutes watching that phenomenal video. So if I had to choose one thing, that would be it.
That is wonderful. Now, Denise, thank you. You are awesome.
You're welcome, my
I
friend.
enjoyed my tour. And now you have to do your assignment. I ask every guest to write a letter to her younger self based on who she is today. So I'm going to ask Ms. Denise to do that for us now.
All right. Dear young Denise, I have struggled to write this letter to you, and even now I have no idea how it will end. I don't think I have a lot of advice to share with you, my younger self. Frankly, I think you did well with what you had and what was laid out before you. You had a mom and dad who adored you and gave you all they could. They supported you in your wild dreams. One day you wanted to be a scientist, and an old microscope managed to appear. When you wanted to take baton lessons, a private teacher in a segregated dance school was somehow convinced to take you on for lessons. Your love of writing never wavered, so paper and pencils were always available. You spent whole weekends watching minor league games with your parents not far from our house, the beginning of a lifelong love of baseball. Your father taught you what hard work and sacrifice meant as he headed out walking every night, wearing workman's rags, to the railroad yard 6 miles away. And then he would return home, change into his Sunday best, and attend your band concert early the next morning. Your mother taught you about family devotion when she didn't leave the house once for over 5 years to care for Dad's older brother with Alzheimer's, and Aunt Letitia, the family matriarch, who could not leave her bed. I learned a lot about family from the two of them as well. Your life was not perfect, and you and I know what that means, but you had love in that house. Your parents taught you to love God, but they also taught you to think for yourself. When you found yourself walking into an all-white school that warm day in September 1963, Your parents walked on either side of you, showing a level of strength and determination you tried to mimic. My dear, you have made some mistakes, but they were of your own making, no one else's. You have had some successes, and they were the result of your hard work and determination, as well as a result of those strong ancestral shoulders upon which you stood. Your biggest dilemma was whether to go to law school or pursue a PhD in history. As it turned out, you did not love the law as much as you loved history. But if you had made any other choice, you would not have had the wonderful husband and children you have today. A nice trade-off, I think. Ironically, you might not be able to serve as a docent at the National Museum of African American History and Culture because you would still be teaching history at some university. Or you might be working in some law firm doing the work you did not enjoy. Young self, you did all right. You made mistakes, and you had some wonderful successes. Most importantly, you had and still have a glorious family who loves you. All things considered, my dear, I am proud of my younger self. Love, old Denise.
One correction, seasoned Denise.
Seasoned Denise.
With many gifts to continue giving. Now, I owe our audience a huge apology. I said we were going to hear from 3 women, 3 generations, and I got caught up in the tour. So I owe you, and I promise to pay the debt of our 3rd phenomenal woman. Now, all phenomenal women at the table have had a chance to feel empowered and encouraged by Ms. Denise Fayne and Maya Angelou. I really look forward to our time together every opportunity we have. I want to allow the theme song to play in a different version. Mr. Tony Walker is going to take us out on piano. Let me remind you, this is your spiritual doggy bag. Just in case you get to that point where you're tired of being tired and you're angry, you're lonely, you don't understand, you don't remember, and you're asking yourself, is this all there is? Well, guess what? You need to understand you are not alone. You are so worthy. You have everything inside of you you need to be the woman that you were created to be. Nothing that's happened to you, the good, the bad, the scary, will ever be wasted. Refuse to be refused. Please understand, I'm here for you, and I'm listening. I look forward to our getting together, same time, same place next week. Your seat is guaranteed. You're listening to Radio Fairfax, Virginia. Tell me how we're doing. Email me at tyra@tyragarlington.com. Be well. Take good care.